Beautiful, beautiful. Thank you so much. Yeah, give them some more love. Yolanda and Wes. Beautiful music ministry. We are blessed here, yes? Good morning. It's a good day to be together, yes? I'm grateful for each of you and for this space this morning as we enter in the holiday season. I want to begin again by saying thank you to Practitioner Al, and we still got to get our speakers moved. It's okay with the other mics, but with this one, I have to get behind those speakers, I think. Maybe we pull it back a little bit and it won't squeak as much. But I want to thank Practitioner Al and Reverend Carol and Reverend Susan again for stepping in for me. Can we give them some love? You learned some beautiful things. I don't think in my 15 years of doing this, I've never called in on a Sunday. Really, I never have. Now I've been sick or ill, but I've in well enough advance notice to know that I wasn't going to be well for Sunday and plan for something. But never on a Saturday have I called in that what we call the back pocket sermon. You got to know who the people in the community are who have that back pocket sermon available, and I'm grateful that we have a wonderful, and I'm thankful to Baji for organizing and making the calls and responding to my text going, I don't think I'm going to pray for me, but I don't think I'm going to make it. But all is well, and we are together here this morning. As Practitioner Victoria mentioned, today is World AIDS Day, and I want to just highlight that for just a moment and give thanks, as she already did, for the great work that we have done and the progress that we've made, not only here in the United States, but around the world, and simply affirm that we have much more to go. So as we just take a breath, and just take that into your heart and just give thanks for all the wonderful ways in which technology and medicine and the raising of consciousness has made a difference in this issue, and how much more we have to go, including, I want to mention that I had a great conversation with my friends from the Fellowship of Affirming Ministries and Bishop Joseph Tolton. The Sunday after our birthday party, you may remember we had some guests here from Dallas, Texas, the regional bishop for the fellowship, Alex Bird, and his partner, Pastor Marvin, and they came up and gave greetings. And the Fellowship of Affirming Ministries is presided by my friend Bishop Yvette Flunder, who does work all over the world in liberation theology, primarily focused around LGBTQI folks and spiritual communities and the Pentecostal tradition. There are a couple of communities here in Atlanta. If you ever want a really powerful, unique, eat your Wheaties that day, because it'll be a long day. But at 3 o'clock in the afternoon over southeast, I think it's southeast, if I get that right, Atlanta off Moreland Avenue, my friends at Rehoboth Missionary Church celebrate in the Pentecostal style, LGBTQI affirming folks, jumping pews, dancing, speaking in tongues, and shouting and running around and everything. It's quite the experience. You've never seen anything quite like it. Service starts at 3. We get out around 6. Sometimes 5:30. And occasionally I go over there in the afternoon. There's also RIM Fellowship, which is downtown in the afternoon as well. So if you ever want to experience that, let me know, and we'll put a group together. But I say all that to say the fellowship is doing liberating theological work around the world, including in the continent of Africa, where we still have so much more progress to be made around this issue. And the reason I bring that out to highlight that today is because one of the ways in which we are roadblocked from making great progress, there's been great progress in medicine, there's been great progress in technology, there's been great progress in campaigns of awareness. However, when you are, when as a community you are stunted theologically with superstition from theology, when you have theology that tells you that that the way you get cured is by having intercourse with a virgin. Hear me now. Now that seems silly to you and I. That seems even not ridiculous, but offensive. But there are whole communities that believe this because people in spiritual power tell them that this is the truth. that God will cure them if they do this or do that. So when you have, see, in any societal system, well, I'm way off the notes today, but let's just go here for a minute. When you're, I'm a little rusty, so I got to get back into my groove here this morning. When you in a society, you can liberate people by doing great charitable work. We're doing it here with our giving tree. When you give selflessly and give of compassion, of your time, your energy, your effort, your tithes and contributions, you can make a difference in the world. You can feed people who need food. You can give people gifts, help them have a better holiday. You can build schools, as our wonderful work with the Kaleidoscope Foundation and our beloved Dr. David Alt is doing. You can do these things, and those are all beautiful, wonderful, necessary things that we should be engaged in. But at some point, you need to recognize that systems of education can still be monopolized, can still be manipulated. Systems of power and government can still be monopolized, and you can bring electricity, you can bring water to a village, but it can still be monopolized and manipulated. But when you free people theologically, when you liberate them from the inside, not from what you give them, but from what you unleash in them, what you unpackage in them, that goodness and wholeness resides in them. When you liberate and free people theologically, then a freed people will never stay oppressed. You see, once you know that you're free, once you know that you're whole, you're loved, you're accepted, once you know that you are one with God, once you know these things that we take for granted in this theological tradition, right, in this spirituality, in this philosophy, they are the bedrock, the everyday basic principles. But when these things are truly new thoughts to you, when they're truly fresh water in a dry desert, and when you can free people theologically and show them that in the context of their own tradition, these truths have always been there, and they can claim them for themselves, then you liberate people from the inside out, and suddenly they will change their education systems. They will change their governments. They will change the corruption. They will change all of those things, the education systems, etc., from the inside out, because they know who they are. And so my friends at the Fellowship of Affirming Ministries are doing this work around the world, in addition to their ministries here, doing great work on the continent of Africa, doing great work in Japan. And we were talking last week with the global bishop, Bishop Joseph Tolton, about connecting his work with SLCA, and I'll bring him here sometime in 2020 and let him share his work and his vision with you, and then we'll just see where that goes. We'll plant a seed and then see what we want to do with that. Does that sound okay? Yeah. So I say that on World AIDS Day to just say that we have more work to do. We see that, and we're committed to that liberation work. Today is also the beginning of Advent. In the Christian calendar, the journey to Christmas. Advent simply means adventure. It means awakening, the hopeful coming of something. And the way we're going to celebrate Advent now, I have spent most of my career in New Thought as what I would call practicing New Thought Christian. So I have spent a lot of time unpacking the metaphysics of the Christian narrative as it relates to science of mind and New Thought. And so I've got quite a bit of material about Advent from a New Thought lens. But this year we're focusing on all the different traditions. Today we're going to talk about Buddhism. Next week we'll talk a little bit more about solstice and some of the other mythologies, the background that most of these rest on. Then on the 15th, we're going to talk about Judaism and celebrate Hanukkah, make that part of our service as well. And then, of course, the 22nd, we'll be back to the Christian narrative. And so we're going to dance around all of these things, but all of that to say that, in my mind, I always package all of that as the adventure, the unpacking, the journey to an awakening of a consciousness within us, a Christ consciousness, the awakening of something deeper within us. And so today we look at the tradition of Buddhism, science of mind, and the connections between science of mind and what is called Rohatsu. And Rohatsu is a Japanese word which simply means December 8th. It's not a fancy translation or a spiritual word. It simply means the 8th day. And December 8th, the reason why this is a sacred moment in the Buddhist calendar is because this is the day, December 8th, which is actually next Sunday. So you say, why aren't we doing it then? I'll get there. Hold on. I'm building up to something. Come on. Right? So next Sunday is considered the day that Buddha awakened. So, but he sat today. He sat down today, and for 7 days. And actually, let me back that up a little bit. He sat down 6 weeks ago. So for 7 weeks. So on the 7th day of the 7th week, he awoken into enlightened consciousness. On the 7th day of the 7th week, which would be December 8th. So let's back up a bit. The reason this is, so the entire next week, beginning today, many Buddhist communities go into deep prayer, meditation, and celebration. There are silent retreats. There's all sorts of things that happen in the Buddhist community to recognize this, and it begins today. We enter it into it today, and then allow that to be the gestation period of awakening into a higher consciousness, like a year-end review, like we would do around New Year's and those sorts of things as well. So very similar to our Advent and other traditions. But let's back up a little bit and get some context for this path of enlightenment. We'll talk about what does enlightenment mean in context of science of mind and religious science and our philosophy. What does it mean to awaken in our consciousness? You all survived the Thanksgiving holiday. I assume you did well. So it's a good day to talk about enlightenment because you're here, right? Nobody's locked up? Well, there was a few people. Victoria kept calling out names, and they're missing. So we will check on them, make sure nobody. Yes, because last week I was supposed to talk to you about science of mind and morality. So some people might have needed that in order to have Thanksgiving dinner with family. But we'll assume all of you here this morning did okay with that, yes? So as we back up a little bit and look at the life of the man, the prince who became the Buddha, Siddhartha Gautama. His birth date is considered to be somewhere in the years of 490 BC to 410 BCE. He was born into a royal family in present-day Nepal, and he lived a privileged and insulated life, insulated from suffering, insulated from want of any kind. It was prophesied on the day of his birth that he would become the next great king. He was the son of a king. That he would the prophecy was that he would either become the next great king or that he would become enlightened. That he would be a great spiritual teacher. Now this concerned his father greatly, right? What a choice. Well, your son is either, somebody came and prophesied to the father and said, your son's either going to become an enlightened one and liberate all of humanity, or is going to carry your reign as the king. Now, what do you think the father was more concerned about? Carrying the reign of the king, right? So he said, well, I don't want him to leave. I don't want him to go out, and I want to surround him with every good thing, as any loving father would want to do. We want to surround our children with every loving thing. And so he gave Siddhartha everything he could possibly imagine. He wanted for nothing. He arranged for his marriage to the most beautiful woman in the village, and he took care of all of his needs. And Siddhartha lived an extremely privileged life, and in fact, accepted and grew up in this space, married the woman, had a child. And one day when he was on a journey outside of the enclosure of his royal village, he saw some things in the world around him. And what he saw was an old man, he saw a sick man, and he saw a dead body. And there was a fourth thing that he saw, which was a monk. And so each of these four things he took on as a symbol to his own learning and expansion of consciousness. And the first three things, the suffering, he saw sickness, pain, and death. And he was concerned that the world was filled with sickness, pain, and death. He had not had that insight prior to this moment. And when he saw the fourth thing, when he saw the monk, he said, well, I am to become a spiritual being, a spiritual teacher, so that I can help people avoid or overcome sickness, pain, and death, the suffering of the world. And so he came back and he left the village, left his wife, left his children, left the princely life and all of the privilege that he had, and went out into the world to study. And so as we go along this morning, I'm going to give you some rules for enlightenment in our own journey, in our own consciousness, in our own awakening this morning. And the first one, I can't tell you how many there are because as I kept writing, I kept coming up with more. I was like, oh, there's 3. There's 4. No, there's 5 or 6. So you're going to have to keep counting yourself. But the first one, that one's easy, right? This one's number 1. Number 1, the first rule for our own journey of enlightenment means is this, that enlightenment does not come by staying in our comfort zone. Enlightenment does not come by staying in our comfort zone. We want to translate the word enlightenment here for a moment, just simply awakening. Awakening to a greater spiritual truth, spiritual insight, growing into our greatest yet to be of our spiritual selves, having that greater consciousness does not come by staying in your comfort zone. Now, I don't know what your comfort zone is. I only know what mine is. And I know what mine has been throughout my journey. And all throughout my life, I've had to stretch and get bigger. I've had to stretch and say, okay, how can I be more? How can I serve more? How can I grow more? How can I put myself in situations and circumstances that make me uncomfortable such that it requires me to deepen my spiritual roots, get a mentor, get a friend, get some education, get some training, and grow into what God is calling me to be. So as you think about, well, what is my comfort zone? Where is the realm in which I think, I've got this. I've got this handled. I know what's what. I know who's right. I know who's wrong. I know anybody like that? You know, and got your comfort zone? Right? Your spiritual insight won't come by you staying inside of your comfort zone. You have to go out, and you have to, more importantly, engage with the other. Whoever it is that you think the other is, right? The other is simply that, who you define as the other. And so Siddhartha's travel showed him so much more of the suffering of the world, and he searched for ways to escape the inevitability of death, old age, and pain. And he did this by studying with the brightest religious minds of the age. And he became a deep meditator. He studied all the various forms of meditation. He even began to deny his own good, began to deny himself food and water so that he could stay in states of meditation, that he practiced this whole method of self-denial in order to gain enlightenment. But guess what he discovered when he did that? He discovered that it wasn't enough. He discovered that no matter how much he self-sacrificed, he never could fully attain enlightenment, that he was still seeing and people were still suffering. He discovered that the highest forms of meditation were not enough to bring about liberation into the world. And so what does this mean for you and I? It means rule number 2, spirituality won't save you. Woo, now I got you awake. You just being in this spiritual community doesn't save the world, nor does it save your own consciousness. In other words, we're not here, what I mean by that is we're not here to get inoculated to the world of suffering. We're not here to get inoculated to the world of conditions. We're not here to get inoculated to the world of pain and suffering. We're actually here, you're here in therapy this morning. This is not a place of inoculation. It's a place of healing and restoration so that you have the spiritual strength, the insight, the muscle, the fortitude, the internal wisdom, tapped into enough so that when you go back out into the world, you come from that place. You come from wisdom, you come from insight, you come from a clarity of consciousness, not so that you can avoid those things in the world, but so that you can engage with them. Siddhartha studied every form of meditation, and it wasn't enough. Now keep this in mind, he became a master at every form of meditation. He studied, he learned, he followed under the tutelage of every teacher that he could find. And what he discovered was it wasn't enough. Why? Because it's not about escaping something. It's about engaging with something. And so the second rule is that our spirituality won't save us. It only can serve us by strengthening us so that we can engage. Now, there's a number of things in this section of his story that we are here to unpack today. The other is that separating ourselves from our good, from our wholeness, will not bring us enlightenment. He practiced a form of spirituality and meditation that was about self-sacrifice, denying his own good, denying his own bodily needs, denying himself any form of privilege or riches or anything like that as a means by which, if I suffer enough, how many people know the template, the meme of the suffering saint, right? If I suffer enough, then that will make me a better person. Stop it. Your suffering won't save anybody, right? Now, we know this in New Thought. We know that we're not here to suffer. We're not here to go without. We're here to claim our wholeness. So Siddhartha had to move into a form of living and practice that wasn't about returning to the luxurious lifestyle that he had, but it was about what they called the middle way. Finding the middle way, that I'm here to eat if I'm hungry. I'm here to take care of my needs. I'm here to be self-sufficient in all of my needs so that I can be in spiritual practice. It's not about the extreme of one end or the other, but it's about the middle way. Are you following what I'm saying? And so separating ourselves from our good will not make us more holy. It will not bring us more enlightenment. It won't do any of those things. In other words, if we don't make room for our wholeness, we'll be forced to take time out for our illness. I'll say it again. If you don't make room for your wholeness, you'll be forced to take time out for your illness. Now I know something about this. I know something about this, right? Because I just had to take time out. I had to dial in on a Saturday and say, I'm not going to make it. I'm not going to be there. Now that hadn't really, on the surface level, in the world of physical condition, it looked like it had something to do with getting a flu shot. But in actuality, it had everything to do with the fact that I was overextended. And I needed to take some time out. I didn't want to take any time out because I was having such a good time with all of y'all, right? Came here in July, and we're building something, and I hadn't taken a Sunday off, and we're teaching in the evenings and doing all of these things and building momentum, and I'm engaging with you as much as I hope you are engaging with me to say, what are we doing here? And are we really up for what Spirit's calling Spiritual Living Center of Atlanta to be? Are we really up for that? Do we have the resources? Do we have the people? Do we have the momentum? Do we have the energy? Do we have the vision and insight? And let's keep talking about it, and let's keep building it. And I didn't want to go anywhere in the midst of that conversation. I don't want to take any time out because I didn't want you to think, oh, well, he's just checked out now, settled in, got everything handled. And so I just kept staying in the game. And finally my body said, you need to rest. If you don't make time for your wholeness, you'll have to take time out for your illness. Now, in my entire career of ministry, I've never done whatever it's been, 5 months, almost 6 months, without taking a Sunday off. That's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. And so, in 2020, you'll see a much different rhythm from me. I'll take time out for my wholeness, right? I'll take time out for my wholeness so that we continue to build something that is feeding all of us, including those that are doing the serving, right? So, separating ourselves from our good doesn't bring us enlightenment. If we don't make room for our wholeness, we'll be forced to take time for our illness. Buddha discovers this insight, and he finds a middle way. He pursues that way of compassion with himself, taking care of his own needs, and he decides to go back into meditation. And so he sat down beginning 6 weeks ago, under what is called the Bodhi tree. And on the 7th day of the 7th week, which begins today would be the first day of the 7th week, insight comes to him, enlightenment and awakening comes to him. And what is that insight and awakening? We talked about it in the Candles of Faith. It's the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path, in essence, what comes forward to him. And out of that insight, we'll break that down and talk about that in just a moment. Out of that insight, he awakens from that place. First of all, by the way, I always like to point out that before he did this, he shaved his head, and he went and he sat. When you see monks a lot of times with their heads, most often, all forms of Buddhism, the monks shave their heads. That's why they all have their heads shaved. But none of them have the hairstyle Buddha had. Did you notice that? None of them have that really cool thing that they got going on. That's because it's not a hairstyle. The symbol of sitting for by the way, the numbers, just like anything, just like they are in the Christian stories, just like they are in all the stories, the numbers are simply metaphors. 7 times 7 means something, right? A cycle of completion. So on the beginning of the 7th week, and the 7th day of the 7th week is a completion of a completion. So he sat down to receive insight until he got it. Long enough until the insight came is what that means. It has nothing to do with the actual amount of days. It has everything to do with the symbology of the numbers, to say you sit for insight until the insight comes. And the symbol that represents how long did that take is represented in how the Buddha is depicted. He had shaved his head, yet we always see him with this beautiful kind of hairdo thing going on. Looks like he's starting to do dreads, right? Got all the twisty curly things. Those are the backs or the shells of snails. That means he sat long enough for snails to crawl up his body and to rest on his head in that configuration. That's a long time. I know, I wouldn't even get one on me. I'd be like, okay, time to go. Right? That's a long time. But it's a symbol. We know this. So we sit long enough until that insight comes. And then out of that place of insight, so that's the next rule, that enlightenment is about awakening and it's about consciousness. It's about how to engage in the here and now. And so the next thing that the Buddha does, or the Siddhartha does as the Buddha, is he becomes a teacher. And for the next 45 years, he teaches the Four Noble Truths, the Eightfold Path, and the ways of compassion in the world. The Four Noble Truths are simple. It simply says that all of the world is suffering. All suffering is due to attachment. Suffering is optional, and the way out of suffering is the Eightfold Path. Very simple, simplistic way of breaking that down for you today. All the world is suffering. All suffering is due to attachment, our attachment to the outcomes, our attachment to the way we want it to be a certain way, etc. All suffering is optional, and all suffering can be overcome through the Eightfold Path. And then the Eightfold Path begins, and you can break these down into 3 categories: wisdom category, conduct category, and discipline category. And they all have to do with forms of consciousness. In the wisdom category, we have 2. We have right view and right thought. To see things rightly, which means to view things in a particular lens. What is the particular lens for new thought, for science of mind? What is the view that we have on the world? It begins with the understanding that consciousness is all that there is. God is all there is. There's one power. There's one presence. There's one love. Am I viewing whatever it is that's challenging me right now through the lens that consciousness is all that there is? If you just practice that, you'll get a long way.
Say it again.
If you just practice that. You view the world through the lens that consciousness is all that there is. Right? There's only one power. There's only one presence. That power, that presence, is the presence of God, and it's revealing itself in, through, and as all things, all of the time. How many times during a day do I not have that view? Do I think that there's some other power, some other entity, some other thing? Or that I have the right view, but they clearly do not. But sitting in right view is understanding that, no, there's only one thing happening here. There's only one thing happening here. And how many places does the world of effects challenge that for me? And then right thought. Right thought is knowing right determination, right differentiation, right awareness, or right intention. When our thoughts are in accord with right dharma or principle, dharma is the word for principle, at every moment we can eliminate 3 poisons. The 3 poisons are greed, anger, and ignorance. So am I thinking rightly? Am I thinking in accordance with principle? So right view, God is all there is. Right thought is, I am one with that. It's beginning to sound a lot like an affirmative prayer, isn't it? Right? I am one with that. I am one with that right view of consciousness. Therefore, I seek to eliminate any form of greed, arrogance, or anger within me, so that I'm thinking rightly about it, because what I think about comes about. Amen? Then it's not just about sitting in consciousness. Buddhists, by the way, are very politically active. right? Enlightenment is about being very active in the world. So this is not about checking out and being so enlightened. This is about engaging with the world around us. And so the next three are about right conduct in the world. And the right conduct is about right speech, right action, and right livelihood. Right speech, right action, right livelihood. So speech comes from my thoughts. Thoughts come from my view. So I first have the right view that God is all there is, and then have the thought that I am one with that. Then how do I speak in affirmation, knowing that whatever I add unto I am gets added unto me? How do I speak in a manner that reflects my thoughts and my view? And then, of course, it doesn't end there. It goes, then what action do I take? How do I show up in the world as a force for good? How do I show up in the world as a force for justice, as a force for wholeness, as a force for right action and right livelihood? How am I manifesting myself in the world such that all the good that comes to me is coming through me through noble means and effort, through integrity? How many people would like to see more right livelihood practiced by others in the world, right? But it begins with ourself. And then we go to discipline. We take our thought and our conduct and we endeavor to be disciplined about how we apply it. So the next three, to round out the 8, are about the dynamic of discipline. Right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. Have you ever felt like, well, I know what the right thing to do is. I know the right thing to do in my life is about this. I know I'm supposed to go in this direction, but you're making it really hard, right? And you keep doing it and doing it and doing it and say, well, it's not working. Well, it's not working. But it's not working, right? This is about the discipline of right effort. We like to say in the science of mind that we treat and move our feet, but we also like to say when we plant the seed for our thought and our prayer into the law of mind and action, we let it go. We allow the creative law of the mind to do its work. We don't dig up the seed to see how it's doing. Right? We let it go. We release. We release the prayer. We release our word unto the law. That's right effort. That's saying, I'll do my part. God, the universe, the intelligence, the wisdom of the universe will do its part. I can only do that, which ought to be done by me. The universe will respond and do its part. My job is to be in right effort, to be in right mindfulness, to be focused on what is mine to do, and right concentration. And so together this brings forward the eightfold path. Can you see how these practices can accelerate you in your path of enlightenment? Accelerate you in your path of awakening. Enlightenment doesn't mean about becoming or gaining a spiritual insight such that you're no earthly good. Enlightenment simply means waking up to what is. Being here and now, waking up and seeing the world as a demonstration of consciousness of your effort, of your action, of your mindfulness, of your discipline, conduct, and creation, and allowing yourself to be more practiced in how we bring it about. Ernest Holmes says, the hour of freedom has struck. The bell of liberty is ringing, and let him that is athirst come. Let us then plunge more deeply into our own nature and into the nature of the universe, and see if we shall not find treasures undreamed of, possibilities never imagined, and opportunities which the fond thought, yearning for freedom, has often in our vision of greater life given us. Every day and every hour, we are meeting the eternal realities of life, and in such degree as we cooperate with these eternal realities in love, in peace, and in wisdom, and in joy, believing and receiving, we are automatically blessed. And so let us take time daily to examine our thoughts, to fine-tune them as needed, to see ourselves in greater alignment with the idea that there's only one power, one presence, one idea, right view of the world, that there's only one thing happening, and that is the power and the presence of God seeking to make its way in through it as us. That's a power of liberation. It's a power of freedom. It's a power of emancipation. It's a power of wholeness. And it is that which seeks to manifest itself in, through, and as me, and as you, and as every living thing. Let us be so attuned with that view that what comes out of that is thoughts of only goodness, thoughts of wholeness, thoughts of oneness, thoughts of divine connection with that reality, such that it informs our speech, such that our speech informs our actions, and our actions inform our livelihood. And on it goes until we are a mindful, centered, grounded being, a dynamic force for good. Can you feel that happening in your life now? I invite the practitioners to stand and join me. I invite you to simply take a deep breath. We'll continue in this energy. Invite yourself now to see this happening in your life. All that whatever conditions or circumstances you walked in the door with this morning, or that you left at the door, or that you left at home, or whatever is happening in the world around us, whether it's on the news or in our own backyards. Let us begin to shift our mind and attention and awareness, knowing that we didn't come here to simply participate in social club activities. We came here to get fueled up so that we might see and be the activity of God on the planet, so that we might see from right living, from right viewpoint, that there is only one power happening. There is only one action taking place. That is the activity of spirit. And wants to know itself through our body politic, through our conversations with our fellow brothers and sisters, through humanity's effort to create more justice and peace in the world, through the environment and through our interaction with it, through our consumerism, through everything about who we are. There is an activity of wholeness that wants to make itself known. As we make room for our wholeness makes room for our liberation, for ourselves and for all of the planet. So for this and so much more in this moment, I know that I am one with this great power. It is moving in through and as me now, and I speak this word, that wholeness is mine, that peace and joy are mine, that prosperity is mine, and that as I claim these things for myself, I know that I am one with a dynamic power which liberates my consciousness into the awareness that these things are infinitely available for all of humanity here and now. There is no me and mine. There is only the one consciousness taking place. So as I claim it, I know that it is claimed on behalf of all. On behalf of all. All places in which there is suffering or separation. In this moment, I speak a word of liberation. In all places where there is lack or limitation, I speak a word of prosperity and good. In all places where there is the appearance of abuse or disenfranchisement, I speak a word of wholeness and peace. I speak a word of transformation. As I claim these for myself, I know that this is the activity that is taking place here and now for all. For this and so much more, I give thanks. I simply now release this word into the law of mind, letting it do what it needs to do. And keep me informed as it goes along, guiding my actions, my activities, and my thoughts and consciousness, now and forevermore, into a world of peace. For this and so much more, I say thank you, God. And so it is. Thank you. Peace and blessings. Good? Yeah. Amen. Thank you, thank you. Grateful for this day. It's time for our tithes and offerings, and I'm grateful for all of the ways in which abundance shows up in our life and circulates through this community. Who we are as a community and our ability to do good in the world is directed by your hands, by your hearts in this moment. Everything that you've experienced today doesn't happen by accident. It happens by divine intention. And so we direct that intention through our gifts. We have, I believe, beginning this week, do we have the extra envelope in there this week? You all have a wonderful tradition that I've never experienced before in my life, which is an extra offering for the staff and the people who make this place run. So that's a beautiful thing. So let me just say thank you for that tradition, and let's keep that going. It's wonderful. So you have all those ways to give, to participate. We have our 11 tags left. We have 10 tags left, because I know I'll take one of them for sure this morning for our giving tree. And so all the ways in which abundance is circulating through this community as our giving, I'm so grateful as we hold those gifts in our hands And we affirm together, I live in a universe of abundance. As I freely and joyfully give, I join in the divine flow. All that I share with life returns to me multiplied abundantly. And so it is.
Thank you, Reverend Dale.